Hi, welcome to Less of Me Success Stories. I'm your host, Robyn Dobbins. My co-host, Natalie Shamp, is also with us today. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Robyn. We know what it's like to be helpless and hopeless. Your journey is not over. You can rewrite your story at any time. We provide a platform for people to share their stories and how they reclaimed their lives using dietary interventions.
Today's live audience are members of my small group coaching. If you are interested in health coaching or joining an upcoming small group, please visit harbingerofhealthllc.com for more information. Links to the website are in the show notes. As a reminder, we are not medical professionals offering medical advice. Please consult with your medical team before attempting any dietary interventions. Today's guest is a nutrition coach certified by the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. As a person who lives with type 1 diabetes herself, she specializes in normalizing blood sugars for both type 1 and type 2 diabetics. She hosts her own podcast, which I've had the pleasure of being a guest, called Low Carb and Fasting, which is also the name of her business, and you can find her website in the show notes. She manages several private Facebook groups, creating a community for scientifically based low carb, low insulin lifestyles. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Nayiri Mississian. Welcome, Nayiri.
You got it. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you were able to join us. I am fascinated with what you're about to tell us because like I said before we started recording, is that type 1 diabetes is often overlooked. I think even in, quote unquote, normal healthcare, it's overlooked. And you get to come at it from a personal experience and a different way of treating and managing. And I'm infinitely curious about it. So I'm going to turn it over to you to share your story, your insights, anything you'd like to discuss. Welcome and share with us, please.
Once again, I'd like to start with a big thank you to both of you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. And okay, so when I get really excited when I get the chance to talk about type 1 diabetes, because you are right, Robyn, it's overlooked. And it's not understood because people mix it up with the more common form of diabetes, which is type 2 diabetes. So people mix up the two, and I get so frustrated, in fact, irritated when people say, oh, now we are proposing to call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes. I go, no, please, no, no, it's confusing enough. In fact, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. And I think that's the surprising part for most people. It's an autoimmune disease like MS, for example, where your own immune system has mistakenly attacked in the case of type 1 diabetes, it's mistakenly attacked the beta cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. Now, insulin is a vital hormone without which we unfortunately wouldn't have a long life. So we wouldn't be able to stay alive without insulin. Yes, too much of it has its consequences, negative consequences, but we do need to have insulin for every part of our body. Actually, each of our body functions, to function properly, we need insulin. So it's a vital hormone. And so type 1 diabetics, before the discovery of insulin, didn't survive long, probably 3 months. And in fact, there are images from the 1920s, 1921. So pre-1921, there are images of children diagnosed with type 1 diabetes who were literally withering away because they didn't have insulin, obviously, to transport energy into their cells. So you could feed them anything you wanted, but without the insulin that the nutrients wouldn't be transported into their cells. And so what would happen is that their blood sugar would keep rising. The sugar in their blood, glucose levels in their blood would keep rising and rising. And so they literally withered away. So I'm fortunate that insulin was discovered, and it is because of insulin that I am here today. So I'm very fortunate. I consider myself very lucky. Now, another thing that not many people know is that type 1 diabetes actually used to be called juvenile diabetes. When I was diagnosed, age 5, in 1978. So in 1978, I was age 5. I was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes because back then, 40 years ago even, or 30 years ago, type 1 diabetes used to be more common among children. So adults, it was very rare that adults would be diagnosed with this autoimmune disease. Nowadays, though, I mean, there are hundreds of theories out there why that's happening. But I will just say that it's not surprising because we are living in a toxic world. Whether we like it or not, our whole environment, our food supply, our soil, everything is just toxic. So, and even many of the medications that most of us rely on these days for sustenance probably have side effects, negative effects. So nowadays, many people are also diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as adults. In fact, I have people over 50, over 60, just diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in my group. So it's no longer called juvenile diabetes. I wish to call it autoimmune diabetes because it distinguishes it very clearly from type 2 diabetes, which is not an autoimmune disease, but it is a disease caused by insulin resistance. So in type 2 diabetics, for example, you would more often than not find high insulin levels. And the problem is that their body is not responding properly to the insulin that they produce. Whereas in type 1 diabetics, you will find insufficient levels of insulin, quite often zero, like in my case. I produce absolutely no insulin. So autoimmune diabetes, I think, would define it much better. Now, insulin, obviously, for type 1 is life-saving medicine, if you like. I don't want to call it drug, but it's a hormone, right? So life-saving hormone. But whereas in a non-diabetic person, there's always that balance between insulin and the other hormone that's produced by the pancreas, and not many people talk about this one. This hormone is called glucagon. Now, in the pancreas, the beta cells produce insulin, and there are different type of cells called alpha cells. The alpha cells actually produce the other very important hormone, which is glucagon. Now, glucagon is the hormone that signals to your liver, where we have glycogen stores of glucose, chains of glucose, if you like, to release that glycogen back into the bloodstream. So this is why in a non-diabetic person, you will never see instances of, oh, I'm shaking, I have low blood sugar. Well, no, because your pancreas does its job. Your pancreas, if your blood sugar is dropping too low, your pancreas will produce glucagon, which then tells the liver to release some glucose into the bloodstream. So you're never actually experiencing, and none of you do, I mean, you will never experience hypoglycemic episodes where you're dropping or fainting and you're in the diabetic coma. Your body's working properly. So now in a type 1 diabetic, glucagon is still produced. So you're constantly, even when you're not eating anything, you're still producing glucose. So your body, because the pancreas produces glucagon, your liver is constantly getting the signal that it's time to release glucose back into the bloodstream. So I think that's one thing that people overlook. So and they don't understand. So my business is, as Robyn, you mentioned in your introduction, my business is called Low Carb and Fasting, because I wanted to give a platform to type 1 diabetics who wanted to do not only low carbohydrate or ketogenic diet, depending on which one suits them best, but also who wanted to do perhaps intermittent fasting or multi-day fast. It can be done, but it needs to be done safely. But when people are first starting, they just write a post in my group saying, well, it's been 24 hours. I haven't eaten anything. And yet my blood sugar is still high. What's happening? Well, it's because your pancreas is still producing glucagon. So your body's forever able to produce glucose without the insulin. So now you can imagine balancing the two, whereas in your body, in your case, or your case, Robyn and Natalie, your body will do it naturally, will constantly balance it out. The insulin and the glucagon, those hormones are like a yo-yo, right? They're constantly balancing each other out. In a type 1 diabetic, you have to do that balance yourself. So you have to take exogenous. That means you have to take injections, exogenous insulin through injections, or nowadays with the newer technology, you can wear an insulin pump. But again, the idea is that you are taking exogenous insulin to balance out your blood sugars, right? So even where you're eating nothing, you still need insulin, right? Now, when it comes to food, now it's very difficult to keep blood sugars in a normal, optimal, healthy range, because you're constantly, the old scales that that perhaps we can still see them at the farmers markets, or the old-fashioned scales, and they put the weights on each side, and it's like that. This is how I envisage balancing blood sugars. You're constantly on one side, you have insulin, you're taking insulin. Oh, it's a bit too much, blood sugar is going low, so you need to take a little bit of glucose to bring it back up again. Now, on top of all of this balancing act, if you add food, now it's getting a little bit more challenging, because anything you eat, if you're type 1, anything you eat will require insulin, because you cannot take any of those micro or macronutrients and transport them into your cells without insulin. So people think, okay, well, I'm not eating carbohydrates. Do I still need insulin? Yes, you do, because even those amino acids from protein do not get into your cells. You cannot build muscle without insulin. And even fatty acids require insulin, or some of them do require insulin, some types of fatty acids, to be metabolized. So without insulin, you cannot say, oh, all I'm eating is butter and I'm hoping to survive until I'm 100. No, you will perish soon enough. So insulin is very important. Now, you need a lot more insulin if you eat carbohydrates. You need a little bit less insulin for the proteins, and you need much less for the fat that you eat in your diet. So it makes sense for a type 1 diabetic, for example, to eat less of carbohydrates, moderate amount of amino acids, perhaps. I mean, it depends on whether you're a bodybuilder or whether you're active, how old you are, etc. But it makes sense to lower the carbohydrates because they will require a lot more insulin. And the more insulin you take, the higher your chances of your blood sugars crashing, because large doses of insulin will lead to, or can lead to, hypoglycemia. So you want to avoid that. So what I do is I eat a very low carbohydrate diet. I focus on the protein because protein for my age, I'm perimenopausal. So this is the age where women, for example, lose large amount of muscle mass, and osteoporosis starts kicking in. So it's important for me to keep my bones and my muscles strong. And so I focus on the protein. Not all type 1 diabetics do, but for me personally, it's important. So I focus on the protein and add a little bit of additional fat and a little bit of carbohydrates in the form of some vegetables to my plate, and that's my meal. My meal is done. My meal is formulated. However, you can have like hundreds of different variations of it. The key lies in lowering your carbohydrates and choosing the right types of carbohydrates that come with fiber. If someone cannot tolerate fiber, then you can leave all your veggies out, obviously. So they're not essential in human nutrition. But if you can tolerate them, fibrous or fiber-rich vegetables actually have a good impact on your blood sugars, because they will not spike your blood sugars. They will keep the blood sugar sort of rise a little tolerable. So it's not, this is what I mean, this just another point. So I really don't like dropping all the carbohydrates as like one big category, because yes, your donut from I don't know, from Aldi, right? I don't know why I said Aldi. I couldn't think of but your donuts are carbohydrates, but then I don't know, maybe the cucumber and tomato salad that you had that day for lunch is also carbohydrate. Not all carbs are the same, because they have different impacts on your blood sugars. So as long as you're eliminating the very sweet or high sugar fruits, high sugar vegetables like the starches, potatoes, etc., and you're sticking to high fiber, low glucose vegetables, then I think that's a pretty good diet for a type 1 diabetic. You need to use your insulin properly. That's what I would like to discuss next, unless you have other questions.
This is a good place to stop. And I think my question's going to lead into that anyway. And I do want you to tell some of your personal story as well. So, but this is fascinating. Where we are now is fascinating. But I did have that question because you said you have people that come in and they're like, it's been 24 hours and my sugars are still high. So do you find that like a type 1 diabetic thinks that I'm just going to fast, I don't need my insulin anymore, and they just drop it entirely when they're first trying? Wow, I would not have thought that, because I would have been like, well, obviously I need this. But so I would love for you to talk about that. And then also this later diagnosis phenomenon that you're talking about. I know I have heard of several people who were diagnosed as type 2, but then found out that they're actually type 1. And then also that you could be type 1 and type 2 at the same time. So this makes my head spin. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, because I think you know how to address those way better than I could ever do it.
Oh, so many points. I wish I wrote them down. So, okay, you remind me, Robyn. So remind me if I miss a point. So, okay, coming to the diagnosis. Unfortunately, people are undiagnosed because you need certain types of tests to diagnose someone as an autoimmune diabetic or type 1 diabetic. And those tests aren't routinely done. So your primary care doctor, for example, their first impression would be, oh, you're middle-aged. Your blood sugars are high, you're probably type 2 diabetic. So this is one thing I really hope to see down the line, for doctors to realize how common type 1 diabetes is now in adults, and to run the proper tests, like the antibody tests to diagnose someone with with type 1 diabetes. So that's one thing. I think we're getting there. There's a lot of changes now. Many doctors are realizing that, but we need education, more education. And we need also patients to advocate for themselves, to go and tell their doctor, I know my blood sugar is high, but don't assume I am type 2 diabetic. I would like you to run the antibody test so we know if I have any antibodies, and if I may be LADA diabetic. Now, LADA stands for latent autoimmune onset. So latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. So this is, they're called LADA diabetics because the onset is later in life, but it is actually type 1 diabetes. It's pretty much the same thing. So, again, so there is a problem with the way they're diagnosed, because they're diagnosed based on high blood sugars. High blood sugar instantly means type 2 diabetes. So patients are now learning and becoming advocates for themselves and asking their doctors to run the proper tests. So type 2 diabetes is a problem of insulin resistance. Now, someone can be type 1 diabetic, and if then they develop insulin resistance or resistance to the injected insulin, over the years, insulin resistance can take up to 10 years, 15 years in some people to develop. So if you're starting injecting insulin and your doctor, unfortunately, or your diabetes dietitian is telling you, well, eat anything you want, just take tons and tons of insulin for it and you'll be fine. Well, people keep taking insulin and their starting point would be about 50 units of insulin per day. And then down the line, like 5 years, 6 years later, they realize, well, I started with 50. Now I'm injecting 100 units of insulin per day. That's a whole vial. That's a lot of insulin. That lasts me a whole month, for example. So this is insulin resistance. You know that they're going to be in trouble because now, on top of their type 1 diabetes, they're producing no insulin, but their body is also developing resistance to the injected insulin that they're taking. So this is why they're requiring higher and higher doses of it. And 10, 15 years later, guess what? Doctor is telling them now, I think you have type 2 diabetes as well. Well, if we have to blame someone, whose fault was it? It is your physician's fault. It is the fault of your medical care team, because insulin is not like your free drug. Take as much of it as you want. When has that ever become the norm for anyone? With other medicines, for example, you have clear doses, right? You have blood pressure problem. Your doctor gives you a set dose. He doesn't tell you, well, don't worry about it. Just go on tomorrow if you want to fancy taking the whole pack, take the whole pack. No, you are set clear doses of insulin. With type 1 diabetics, we're told just don't change your diet. You don't have to. Just eat anything you want and cover it with insulin. So what happens? You're basically telling them insulin is doesn't have any side effects. Take as much of it as possible. With no other drug, Robyn, does the physician tell their patient, take as much of it as you want, right? And yet it makes me angry because when it comes to insulin, we're effectively told, don't worry about it, just take as much of it as you want. So, of course, look, I have type 2 diabetics in my family, both sides of my family. So I'm I've definitely got the type 2 gene, right? So both sides of my family, grandparents, and I have people who ended up on dialysis. I have people who ended up with a stroke, all because of type 2 diabetes. Both sides of family, mother side and father side. So I'm prone to insulin resistance. If I hadn't changed my diet, and I'm not obesogenic. I'm not that type. Dr. Savas talks about this. Robyn, I don't know if you got to his lecture yet, but you will. Yeah. So he put a distinction between people who are diabetogenic and obesogenic. So if you're obesogenic, you're obviously growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And then 20, 30 years later, diabetes hits you. Whereas if you are the diabetes developing type, you are not going to grow obese, but with a tiny bit of visceral fat. Now, hey, 6 years later, you're diabetic. So I'm that type. I wouldn't have grown obese necessarily, but I would have been type 2 diabetic had I not changed my diet. So it really makes me angry that we're told, don't worry about insulin. Well, like anything, any other drug, it does have side effects if it's not used properly or if it's abused.
Well, this is absolutely infuriating, and this is not a category of life that I live in, but it is absolutely infuriating that that's how it is. I can't imagine, and I know this is happening not just with diabetes care, no matter the type, but it's happening across many different facets of the medical world, that these doctors are treating and nobody's getting better. Like, they've got to be extremely frustrated, but I don't understand why they're not asking the questions. Like, there's so few of them that come back from, oh, I've had a career of treating patients and every single one of them still had complications. I had to give every single one of them more medication. I had to send them to different specialists. And now my career is over. I feel great about myself. Like, I can't see that being a thing. Like, what other job do you have that exists that you are still considered great, even though there was zero success in what you did? And that just keeps perpetuating. Like, why aren't we looking at the fact that somebody's taking an entire vial of insulin? This is just nuts. No question. I'm just mad.
Yeah, it makes me angry too. I mean, there's something else that really makes me angry when it comes to type 1 diabetes. The fact that patients aren't educated about their disease and about how to manage their blood sugars. They are not given proper education. The only education that people are given in the United States, and it's the same here, and in fact everywhere else in Europe as well, is that you have to count your carbohydrates, and this is how much insulin you're going to take to cover your carbohydrates. But that's not how real human biology works, right? It's not 2 + 2 is always going to be, whether you're in England or wherever in the US, 2 + 2 is where it's summertime or springtime, 2 + 2 is always going to be 4. But
I mean, even me, like, if any person, if you're eating too much carbohydrate, you're going to have some sort of complication. You just may not know it. So to tell somebody who is insulin dependent that it's just a free for all, do whatever you want, we've got this magic shot that you can take and it's going to cover it for you, just doesn't seem like it makes any logical sense whatsoever.
It doesn't, because a lot of it is down to your digestion. So if you eat the carbohydrates, you don't know how quickly on that particular day, and it varies from day to day, but on that particular day, you don't know how quickly those carbohydrates are going to turn into glucose and show up in your bloodstream, right? You don't know how quickly that process is going to happen. Besides that, you don't know how quickly the insulin that you just injected, how quickly that's going to start taking effect. Because even the rapid-acting, fast-acting insulins, they start peaking anywhere between 15 minutes to 2 hours. And so you don't know how quickly it's going to start impacting and bringing the excess blood glucose out of your bloodstream and into your... You don't know how quickly that process is going to be. So to match the blood sugar rise and the insulin peak to each other is playing with fire, because you cannot possibly match those two actions, because It varies from day to day. It's down to your digestion. And besides it, carbohydrate counting is not science either, because at best, the carb content of certain foods is an estimate. We don't really know. I mean, that particular apple might have more fiber and less glucose and a little bit more fructose. And you have no idea how much sugar you've just injected, because we're only estimating, right? And then to estimate how much insulin you're going to need for it, you're playing with two massive fires. So this is what makes sense not to eat those types of carbohydrates and stick with the fibers. Then the fiber will have no impact on blood glucose. Stick with your proteins, because yes, even protein will raise your blood sugars a little bit, but it's not going to raise it to 300 and 350 or 400, which is what we see, sadly, in children day in, day out. We see their blood sugar, 400, and then crashing, and then up again, and then crashing. That, if you look at their graph over 24 hours, it's horrifying. It's horrifying. So, because there is no other way of managing it unless you change your diet.
I know Natalie has a question, but I want to address that real quick. What are the consequences of this continuous roller coaster? What happens down the line?
Okay, so when your blood sugar is high, we know that high levels of glucose in the body are already damaging every nerve ending in your body. So this is how you're actually also damaging each of your organs. You're damaging your retina. So this is why retinopathy, neuropathy, kidney disease, nephropathy, these are all very common among diabetics. So high blood sugars are literally killing every cell in your body, including your brain cells. That's one thing. But every time your blood sugar is high, you're freaked out. You don't want to leave it at 400. I don't know why people don't think, well, could have prevented it from rising. Maybe I, could have said no, thank you to that soda or whatever they drank. But because they're encouraged, they're told, hey, you can take insulin, right? So that people take insulin to bring it back down to normal again. And once the blood sugars are crashing, even before they go into hypoglycemic levels, as they're crashing, coming down fast, you start feeling hungry again, because that sudden blood sugar crash will leave you shaking. So you start feeling like you're in diabetic coma, like you're shaking and you're hypoglycemic, and you check your blood sugar. I'm 200, like 200, you're literally, but because you were just crashing from 400 down to 200, the minute you reach 200, you're already feeling hungry again. And I've actually learned in recent years that sudden blood sugar crash also triggers ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. And so now you are really hungry. Now, before your blood sugars actually get to normal levels, now you're eating again. The whole cycle repeats again. And so imagine you're a child and you're sitting at school and you have to concentrate. You have to use your brain. It's impossible. I mean, it really is impossible. I feel sorry for children who are going through that, because there is a way out. And I'm not saying that if you're not eating those carbohydrates and if you change your diet, you no longer need to put any effort into managing your blood sugars, because you forever will have to, unfortunately. It's a constant task, and it's something you'll have to do for the rest of your life, because you don't have a functioning pancreas. You have to act like your own pancreas. However, it gets easier because you're not going to reach 400 when you eat your steak. Yes, if I don't take insulin and I just have meat, for example, a carnivore meal, right? Maybe cheese or butter and steak, my blood sugar would rise without insulin. It could get to 150, maybe 160. Then I take insulin, obviously, to bring it back down again. But if instead of the steak, I had a whole bowl of pasta, my blood sugar would go right up to 400, so without insulin. So that's the difference. Yes, you are still going to need insulin, but you're going to need less insulin. And even when you forget your insulin, your blood sugar rise isn't going to be dramatic. So it makes sense to, and I'm not saying everyone should just completely cut out, carbohydrates, vegetables, etc., and just go on a carnivorous diet, although, of course, that works too. But it makes sense to reduce the insult to your body. And the insult comes in the form of fast-acting carbohydrates, sugars, and most of the fruits that people eat, potatoes, grains, all grains, right? So Robyn, you're on a no sugar, or you started off with a no sugar, no grain diet, and that is a perfect diet for a type 1 diabetic. Perfect diet.
So my question, pardon my anti-science ignorance, but I recall back in the late 80s, a family member with type 1 diabetes and was hospitalized very close to a coma. And then so that triggered having a dietitian come and give information and whatnot. And I specifically remember, there was more to the conversation, but what I specifically remember was, do not eat fatty meats. Those are not your friends, right? And fat is not your friend. I don't remember carbs being a topic. I remember corned beef specifically was one of the things where they said that never eat that. But if you have too much candy on Halloween, just give yourself a little more insulin. So my question with that is, how did you come to realize that that's false information? Or semi-false, if you will.
So in 1978, when I was diagnosed, I was in a country along the Mediterranean. It's a Middle Eastern country. And my mom was given a sheet of paper with a green list of foods, and they were all your low carbohydrate vegetables, cucumbers, and all the salad greens, and lots of meats and dairy and cheese and all of those in the green list. And the orange list was things like potatoes, rice, bread, which she had to moderate, right? And the red list were all the cookies and processed foods and juices. So I could never have those. So I grew up in an extended family because my father passed away when I was two years old. So my mom moved in with her parents. It was a big house, big family. So my grandparents and my mom is the oldest. But my grandparents at the time had two of their children unmarried. They were young, in their early 20s, going to college. So I grew up with a young uncle in the house, my mom's sister, my auntie, and then my mom, my brother, my grandparents. So it was a big household. Everyone ate the same foods that I was eating. Every single one of them. I don't have any recollections when I was growing up of sitting at a dinner table. We all had dinner together at the dinner table, traditional sort of way of eating. I don't remember any other family member eating stuff which I wasn't supposed to eat. That was the norm for me. It became the norm. And because I was young enough, I was 5, so I do not remember what I ate before that. So that was my norm. I grew up on a lower carbohydrate diet because that was the norm. Then in the 80s, Natalie, what you're saying is in the 80s, insulin manufacturing companies created rapid insulins. So Novo Nordisk came up with what you guys have, Novolog. So it's called NovoRapid here, but it's manufactured by the same company. And so these rapid-acting insulins were the big thing, the big trend in the late 80s, maybe early 90s as well. So then everyone was told, you don't have to make any dietary changes. We have this perfect insulin that's supposed to match your blood sugar rise perfectly. Because if you eat pasta, for example, you're going to see an instant blood sugar rise. So supposedly this fast-acting insulin can mitigate that. That was the idea. So we were all told, eat what you want and avoid fats. Because fat, I mean, it's the same. It's what they tell the general population, because they still believe that it was fat from meats that caused heart attacks and heart disease, etc. And so they recommended the same diet to type 1 diabetics too, to avoid heart disease. But they said, we've got this magic insulin now, rapid acting insulin, which we never had before. Back in the 1970s, we didn't have that insulin. Insulin just would take forever to start peaking. And it didn't have a large peak. It was like a tiny little bump. So it matched the low carbohydrate diet perfectly, those older insulins. But with the new insulin, we were told you can eat anything you want. And this is what I think you probably remember. So in the late 80s, early 90s, it was the big thing. Now everyone, of course, uses, well, not almost everyone, unless they're advocating for themselves and fighting their healthcare teams to prescribe different types of insulin for them. But everyone, most people now around the world are using fast-acting insulins because supposedly it perfectly matches your blood sugar rise. But of course it doesn't. It doesn't. In fact, it peaks at a time of its own, and it varies from day to day. One day it peaks in 10 minutes, another day it peaks at the 2-hour mark, and then it just crashes you because it's rapid acting, it's potent. So this is why we're seeing roller coaster blood sugars up and down, up and down.
That's exactly what would happen to this person. They would have a big meal or, cake or something because they were for sure sugar addict, and then take the insulin. And the next thing you know, they're like literally you're wondering if they had the flu, because that's exactly what the, symptoms would look like on their face and their eyes, all of the, things. He didn't look well. I don't know how he's still alive, if I'm being totally honest, because it's been such a long cycle of living that way, and he's never changed his diet. So it's pretty interesting. And then that is where I got personally, I was afraid of ketosis, because that is what I always considered to be a fast track to the ER, was if you're in ketosis, now I'm going to go into a diabetic coma. I didn't know that there was a difference because, why would I? I've never reached out to learn that. So I think there are other people out there who, I hope, or I'm just really dumb, to think that there is a huge difference between dietary ketosis and obviously ketoacidosis is what I believe.
Yeah,
it's called.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And at every opportunity, I try to raise this distinction. So one is called actually nutritional ketosis. When your body is perfectly healthy, otherwise, you have enough insulin on board, you have insulin to support normal bodily functions, but you are, instead of burning glucose as your primary, because the body will burn both at the same time. So it doesn't, the human body never is like without glucose, right? Some of our cells, including the red blood cells, for example, use exclusively glucose. But as your primary source of fuel, your body is burning ketones instead of glucose. Now that is called nutritional ketosis. Now, diabetic ketoacidosis is different, because that's when you start having ketones in your body because you don't have sufficient insulin. So it's not because you've eaten fats or fatty acids or fatty foods and you're burning ketones for fuel. You have those ketones in your body. They shouldn't be there because you're a glucose burner. So why are they there? Oh, it's because you don't have enough insulin. Because you don't have enough insulin to take those fatty acids into your cells. And so the ketones remain high in your body. Now that's toxic. That's actually quite fatal. But that's a very, very different scenario. That happens when you don't have enough insulin in your body. In fact, DKA, as it's called, diabetic ketoacidosis, is usually the first symptom of type 1 diagnosis. So type 1s usually find themselves in the ER, and then they're told, okay, your blood sugar is like 600 something. I've even heard 1,000. So blood sugar of number of which you don't get on a normal glucose meter, by the way. So and you don't have insulin. Your body is not producing insulin. Your blood sugar is high. You have ketones in your body, so that's very dangerous. And in fact, your electrolytes also go completely out of balance, and your body gets severely dehydrated. Oh, that's really dangerous. You're in real danger. People die of it, actually. So that's dangerous. But as we know, if you are in ketosis, you're still taking your insulin, you're keeping yourself well hydrated, you're probably taking electrolytes as well. I mean, I usually just add salt to my water, and I keep my electrolytes up, and I have enough insulin, and my blood sugars are not reaching 400. My blood sugars are not, in fact, rising, above 100 at most. And so that's a perfectly healthy state to be in, and that's called ketosis, nutritional ketosis.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Natalie, because that was actually one of the questions that I was going to have. When I first started eating low carb and I started talking about, being in the state of ketosis, I had a friend that was like, "You're going to die, be really careful." And I was like, no, it's two different things. And this person's well-educated, a researcher, like doctor, somebody. And I was like, it's different. And I had to literally give them an article to explain the difference so that they would back off. But it's something that infuriates me, because at any opportunity for a drug commercial to be on, they always mention the word ketoacidosis. And I think it's just for that very reason that Natalie said. It's to keep that confusion there for everyone to be like, "Ooh, I don't want to try keto. I might die." And they just keep shoving that word out there to keep that confusion going. And it irritates me.
Well, and another point to that, yes, I agree with you. That's why I'm like, I would never do the keto diet. I'm afraid of all of that until I heard Vinnie Tortorich talk about the difference. And that's where I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. What a dummy. I didn't even know. But I also didn't know I suffered from hypoglycemia for years and years and years. And no one ever told me that means you have some a form of diabetes. I didn't know that. So for uneducated, I'm not educated in the medical field in any way, or the science field or biology field. How would someone ever know this unless a doctor was to tell them that, this is what you need to do? Not eat a Snickers bar, but to, change maybe your nutrition and what you're eating daily.
And to be fair, I mean, your doctor isn't educated in the difference between ketosis and ketoacidosis. They have received enough training about the dangers of seeing ketones in the human body, because let's face it, the average human being, take anyone from down the street, there shouldn't be ketones in their body. They're glucose burners. The average population are glucose burners. There is no reason for a single ketone body to even appear in their system. They should not have ketones. So ketones are dangerous in someone who is a glucose burner, who's on the standard American diet, right? And so this is what doctors are educated in. They learn that ketones are dangerous because they have no business appearing in someone's body. But then they haven't learned that these ketones, however, are a normal byproduct of using or burning fat for fuel for someone who is in the state of ketosis. That part they haven't learned. They learned about the dangers of ketones. And yes, ketones are dangerous in people who shouldn't have ketones. There shouldn't be ketones in any meal. But take Take your neighbor from down the road, unless they are on the same diet as you, Robyn, for example, they shouldn't have ketones in their system. If they do, then that could mean dehydration, electrolyte imbalance. So your doctor is quite right to be, inquisitive about, to say that's dangerous, because it can be dangerous. Or do they have sufficient insulin? Are they suddenly type 1 diabetic? Is their blood sugar normal? Because they should not have ketones. What they haven't learned is that there is something called nutritional ketosis, which is a completely normal, natural state, healthy state to be in. They haven't been educated in that. So, I don't want to give them credit for not being inquisitive to actually learn, because which world are they living in? Look, there's so many podcasts like yours, like mine, so many other channels who are constantly educating the public about ketosis and the therapeutic effects of carbohydrate reduction, or even ketogenic therapy for mental health. Why is your doctor still ignorant of this? That surprises me. I understand they haven't been educated 20 years ago when they went to university. Why are they not finding out this information?
And they're supposed to be continuing their education. So, okay, I get it. You didn't know it at some point, but it's too late now to say, I didn't learn that in medical school. You're supposed to be doing continuing education. You're supposed to be reading up on articles. You're supposed, not just the summaries, you're supposed to read the whole article and have a full understanding of it. And well, I don't have time to do it. It's just such a complicated issue that, there's so many inputs that they have to follow these protocols and they don't have the time. But it's still no excuse to constantly watch your patients not get better and have a full career of nothing that you've done has ever worked, and then retire and go on your merry way.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's the opposite. You try to explain to them what you've done to make your blood work better, your weight loss come off, your energy levels high, and they just dismiss you and tell you that you're on a fad diet and it's never going to work. And then they walk out of the room and they don't, they basically want to dismiss you as a patient for sure. That's been my experience.
And mine too. And that is why many type 1s, for example, in my community, just do what they feel is right for them without telling the full truth to their healthcare team, because they're not going to be understood. They're going to be dismissed. So they just go and do what feels right for them. It shouldn't be like this. It should not be like this. And this is why I am passionate about what I do. I serve my community. I want every type 1 diabetic to be educated, to understand how to use insulin properly, to understand how different insulins work, because we have different types of insulin, how to use them properly, and how to optimize their diet. These are all important. And I'm passionate about helping people. So anyone who's struggling, email me.
And we'll put your information in the show notes. So that leads me to this question. What would you say are the major benefits of using the ketogenic diet for a type 1 diabetic?
Okay, so a ketogenic diet can come in many forms, right? So if we're talking about the ketogenic diet, the classic 4-to-1, like the real high-fat ketogenic diet, it's very beneficial in cases of epilepsy. And there are type 1s who also have epilepsy. So for them, it's perfect. This is why my type 1 group on Facebook is actually called Keto and Type 1, for Keto and Fasting for with type 1 diabetes. So because I wanted to give that safe space for people who want to do ketogenic diet, but also have type 1 diabetes. However, if that high fat element isn't of particular interest to you, you don't have to do that level of, you don't have to go into that sort of level of ketosis. You can have a high protein, low fat, and low carb diet. And there are bodybuilders in my group who just focus on protein. They lower the fat because they want very minimal body fat. Obviously, they're bodybuilders or athletes, and they have to lower the carbs. So, I mean, low carbohydrate diet can come in many forms depending on your context. However, if there is another comorbidity, if there are other cases like mental health issues and epilepsy, for example, depression, bipolar, and type 1s can have these comorbidities as well. So for those people, they have to have a high fat diet, moderate the protein a little bit, and keep the carbohydrates as low as possible.
So is this helping, like you said, there's different types of insulin out there. So does this help overall, like their management, maybe the expense, how much they have to go into their doctor, how much they have to test? Does it help all of those things as well?
Well, it certainly helps. It keeps you away from the emergency room. I mean, look, I'm a member in many mainstream type 1 diabetes groups on social media. Almost every day, I hear people saying, oh, this is my 3rd time in the ER in the last 3 months. Like, why have you let yourself go? How can you be not well informed about, your condition? Why are you ending up in the ER? And people live like that. People live decades like that. And it's really sad state of affairs to be in. Type 1 is one of those conditions that no one else can manage for you. People can give you tips, but that's all you can do. Not even your endo, your diabetes specialist nurse, your diabetes specialist dietitian, your nutritionist, your endo. Your endo is not living with you to make hourly decisions for you, right? You need to balance your glucose, insulin. It's like constantly putting one or the other on the balance. It never stops. It's like a yo-yo. You want it perfectly balanced, but it's constantly moving up and down, up and down, up and down. You want it to be perfectly balanced, and that's our aim. But it's not going to happen if you don't put the effort in. So you put a little bit of insulin, and then you have to watch the glucose. If the glucose is going too low, you put a little bit of glucose on the balance. And then you realize, oh, blood sugar is rising a bit too high, so I need a little bit of insulin to bring it back down again. It's a constant balancing act. You're the one who's going to be able to manage that. No one else can. I mean, if you're a child, credit to all the parents out there. And I have some of my clients are children, right? I work with their parents. It's hard work. It is hard work. And, but that's it. But no one else can do it for you. You need to learn how to keep that balance, keep the scale perfectly balanced, if you like, at least most of the time. So it's tough work. So you need to be well educated, so you're not relying on your 6 monthly visit to the diabetes clinic. So your endo can tell you, hey, try increasing your insulin. How does that help you? Try increasing, because the next day that might be too much for you. So you need to be able to make those decisions to increase your insulin, to decrease it on an hourly basis. It's that tough. It's not easy, but if you are educated, well educated, you certainly should be able to do it yourself.
Yeah, so it sounds like if you're low carb and you're managing your dietary inputs, then the swings are less. So the management with the insulin shot is a little bit easier to control. So the overall frustration of having to figure out the calculation for how much I need to cover this is just, it's tamed down. It doesn't eliminate, but it's a little bit easier to manage overall.
Yeah, you put it perfectly, better than I did.
Yay me! So
Summary.
I have one. We're losing you. It's getting a little dark there. So I think your sun's going
the
up.
light on. We actually do have lighting.
Did you lights
Great
in
Britain?
London? They do that there? I didn't know. That's funny. Thank you. That's better. So I've been curious about this, and you haven't actually touched on it. So I want to ask this kind of onset and kind of extreme levels now of more and more type 2 diabetics in the world, and the treatment being the same as far as medical doctors are concerned. Just give them insulin. How has that affected the type 1 community who is reliant on it because you don't produce it yourself?
Okay, so if I understood your question properly, I'm not sure I did, however.
Okay, so like, is it hard to get medications now? Are you like fighting this? Like, is it, you need it?
Yeah.
Like, do you get first in line? I mean, it seems like it can't be unlimited amounts of medications just for everyone to pass around like candy. You need it. So has that become a problem?
I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you so much. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's okay. So what we're seeing now, in fact, the type 1 community faced a crisis last year, about maybe 16 months ago, when one of the largest insulin producing companies, which is Novo Nordisk, made an official announcement in the US that they will discontinue one type of insulin, which is called Levemir insulin, that they will discontinue it because now they are investing more of their funds in weight loss drugs. So the small type 1 community that uses that particular type of insulin obviously doesn't make business sense for them. So that's really sad because of all that, weight loss kind of drug craze. So they're going to put more investment into that now. So we felt really betrayed because there is that medical kind of pharma monopoly, if you like. There are basically 3, maybe 4 insulin producing companies globally around the world. So it's not like any other drug that you get many generic forms of, right? So your drug that even CVS produced their own, or Walmart produced their own. So Walmart, actually, talking of Walmart US, they produce one type of insulin, which didn't have a patent. So they just grabbed the opportunity. They still produce that, sell it very cheaply for $25. You don't need a script. You can go and buy that. So we'd like to see that with this particular insulin, which is called Levemir insulin, so I have supported. There is a new alliance called Alliance to Protect Insulin Choice. So APIC. So I supported them. We created a website for them. They are a registered nonprofit in the US now, and they are working very, very hard to keep this particular insulin still available in the US. It's quite a complex issue, but they are working hard because many children rely on that type of insulin because it's one of the safest types of insulin for children. It's one of the safest, in fact, the only FDA approved insulin for pregnant women who have gestational diabetes. So it's a vitally important insulin. We want that to stay in the market, or what the alliance is advocating or asking for is that Novo Nordisk completely kind of sell their patent or rights of the insulin to a generic or biosimilar company who will then produce it. So the alliance needs, obviously, FDA's help with all the legalities, and they will need Novo Nordisk to facilitate the process. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So yes, so it's not that the type 2 diabetics using insulin has affected the insulin availability for type 1s. It's more that insulin producing companies are now seeing another big profit for them in the form of weight loss drugs. And so that's where, and of course, weight loss drugs are also prescribed to type 2 diabetics, right? Because initially they were diabetes medications. And so that's where they're going. And the type 1 diabetic community is feeling the grudge. I mean, we're feeling like we're neglected now. So I'm glad you brought that up. So
yeah, that's interesting, because I really thought that it was an influx of just, there's just so many people who aren't metabolically healthy, and it's creating type 2 diabetes as a result. And so the limited amount of medication is going to them, or you're having to sparse this amount out between this many people instead of a smaller amount of people. But it's very fascinating to hear, again, another problem with these weight loss drugs, and this cash cow that they're all gravitating towards. And betrayal is exactly the right word. You absolutely need this. This is your life support. This is your lifeline. And for some just conglomerate somewhere to just say, we don't care about them at all. We've got more money to get.
Novo Nordisk company, by the way, are the only ones to produce Levemir insulin. So the other 3 or 4 insulin producing companies do not produce this type of insulin. This is a very gentle acting insulin, very flexible. It has a short shelf life, if you like. So you can give your child 1 shot in the morning or a smaller shot if they're going to have an active day at school on that day, and then 2 or 3 short sort of shots or doses throughout the day. It's very flexible. It's very safe. No other insulin producing manufacturing company produces this type of insulin. That's one thing. But also, if we go back in history, Novo Nordisk, back in the 1920s, were given the patent to produce insulin completely free, with the promise that they would keep, respect, and honor the insulin creator who gave them the patent for free, that they will keep producing insulin for the type 1 diabetics whose life depends on it. That was their promise. They had the patent either for free or for $1, something like that. So, and we do feel betrayed. So there are different types of insulin, but not all insulin is the same. So you don't want to give your child insulin that stays in their system for 36 hours, because it's very difficult to titrate that. If your child is going to play tennis for 3 hours on that day, that background insulin that's going to be in their system for 36 hours, there's no way you can take it back out of the system. You've given them the injection the day before, probably. It's still in their system. It's not very safe. This is why you see children playing sports and that they're crashing constantly, because they're taking these long-acting insulins. This Levemir insulin is really safe, but it's a major crisis now. So maybe I can pass you, Robyn, their details, and you can support the alliance.
Yeah, I wrote that down to definitely include that. So yes, please email me that any information you have, because I will include it in our notes, because that's a big deal. And so I'm assuming, I don't know very much about this, but I'm assuming, but because they're a pharmaceutical company, you can't they're protected. So you can't have a lawsuit against them for just opting to not do it. And it seems like you would be able to, because they got that special privilege of free or $1 patent, but there's just no action that can be taken.
Honestly, I don't know all the legalities, but all I know is that it's so complex. It's so complex. I mean, for example, it was shocking to find out for that particular insulin, there were actually many patents, like 7 or 8 mini patents. It's not like one patent, it's gone, you give it to someone else or you sell it on and then it's gone. No, it's like many ones. And and some of them need FDA approval. Some of them, I mean, it's just a very complex issue. So do invite Alison Smart, who's spearheading the alliance. She'd be happy to come and share with you what she's done so far. So I support Alison, obviously, but she's the one who's running single-handedly in the US, going to Washington and attending meetings and meeting with senators. And it's a major issue because we don't have a biosimilar. If we had a biosimilar, who cares? I mean, fine. Well, there's the Walmart version of it, but there isn't at the moment. So we want that process to be facilitated so that there is a biosimilar and people can have access to that safe, gentle, sort of flexible insulin.
Yeah, this is just, it's another symptom of this very complicated medical system that we've put into place. And at the end of the day, it affects real humans. And that's where there's like a huge disconnect. There are real people that are involved. This isn't your discussion in the boardroom. This is real life, everyday life, and it matters. It just makes me so angry.
I'll send you a video that I recorded with people who use Levemir insulin, and they came and read their statement on why it matters to them. And many of those people were parents of children who use Levemir insulin. So the videos on my channel, I'll send you the link so it's easy for you to find. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I like talking about type 1 diabetes because it's not a disease that's easily understood. We're not supported by our medical care team, and we're not even now supported, or we don't feel like anyone thinks we're important when it comes to the drug manufacturer or insulin manufacturing companies. So this announcement from Novo Nordisk was a big slap. So we'll see where we go with it. So.
Well, I just appreciate you for banging your drum as loudly as possible because, yes, this needs to be heard. And I hope that you get to spread your message further and further and further because, you know, some of the stuff that you're talking about, honestly, I'd never really heard before. So thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. And I'm glad we get to share it with our followers. And yeah, I mean, this has just been an incredible conversation. We've run over our normal prescribed time, and we didn't even hear your personal story. So we're going to have you back on. And I love talking to you about this. I agree with you. It needs to be heard. We need to be shouting this. You know, I'm in my little circles because of my mental health side, but your circle is just as big and needs to be recognized and you know, more advocates out there for all of you who, you know, you need a life-saving medication. You need to learn how to the education on management. I can understand completely why you are so extremely passionate about this, and I feel that. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to hear so much more. I wish we had like a 3-hour time frame to go into all this because I have so many more questions, but I also feel your passion, and it radiates through your tone and just everything about you. I'm proud to have been introduced to you because this is a cause, and we should bring our causes together. It all ties together. It's all one. And if we can just, you know, get the word out there, more people, they just don't have to suffer, you know? And so anyway, I just would like to tell you, thank you so much. I'm honored that we got to talk to you today. And with that, where can people find you?
Low Carb and Fasting, all one word, lowcarbandfasting.com.
That's awesome. I already bookmarked it, by the way. I'm going to keep up with this. This is really interesting to me. So to our followers, if you've enjoyed today's episode, share with your friends on social media and spread the word. It's the best way to support us. This is such an important topic. This is such important information for all of us. Even if you don't suffer from type 1 or type 2 diabetes, this is just important to know. So let's keep the conversation going and share on your media. Thank you.
Nayiri, we have a question that we ask all of our guests at the end of the show to your type 1 community when you're answering this question. If you could give one piece of advice for someone who is just embarking on their low carb journey, what would that be?
Do not fear diabetes. Embrace it and learn how to manage it.
I think that perfectly sums up everything you've talked about today. I appreciate you joining us so much. I'd like Natalie, definitely could have continued forever and ever. So we'll be sure to invite you back on with us at a later date. And maybe, please send me Allison's information because, again, like Natalie said, this is we're a big community but we have like these small little areas and we all kind of focus on our one thing. We could be so much more if we unite it. And I believe that. I believe we need to do that. For us in the mental health community, we had Jan Bazuki just like grab everybody and put us all in one place. And now we all can do that. We need that like everywhere. We need to embrace one another and help each other out because all in all, we're all dealing with the same issue. It's the food we're putting in our mouth and how it affects how we manage other things, our comorbidities, if you will. And you've really brought that to light.
And there are actually people who belong to both communities. There are type 1 diabetics who also have bipolar, for example.
Absolutely. Yeah. I get it. So thank you again so much. On behalf of Natalie, Scott King, who couldn't be with us tonight, and Nayiri Mississian, I did it. Thank you so much for joining us on Less of Me Success Stories.